So yeah. So today I'm joined by TD Thornton, a local journalist, horse racing journalist. So I want to thank you for joining me today and to talk about the Kentucky Derby, horse racing, and Linden Place. So whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Joe. I wish I could be there in person, but obviously, as we're taking some baby steps getting back to normalcy, we're going to do this virtually for this year, and hopefully, it'll be a lead into bigger and better things for your Derby party next year. But the show is ready to go on. The first Saturday in May, the Kentucky Derby is rooted in tradition. It's been run every year since 1875. And just by way of introduction, my way into the sport, I'm a New England kid. I grew up in Salem, New Hampshire. And Salem, New Hampshire, when I was a kid, featured a racetrack, Rockingham Park, one of the first horse racetracks in New England. And my dad, both my parents were school teachers, but my dad also trained racehorses on the side. So I got to go to the track with him when I was a kid. And from a very young age, I always wanted to be figuratively on the other side of the fence where all the action was. When I was 5 or 6 years old, watching him saddle the racehorses and get them ready to race, I couldn't quite participate then, but I had a dream when I was a young kid that if I ever could make my life go in that direction and be on the other side of that fence where all the action was, and where all the excitement and what people were coming out in thousands of people to the racetrack to enjoy, if I could ever get myself into that, that would be my dream come true. I eventually went to school up at the University of New Hampshire to study journalism. And when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I figured if I could ever fuse my two twin passions, which were writing and horse racing, into one thing, that would be like going to heaven for me. And I eventually made it work, and worked at Suffolk Downs, the racetrack in Boston, for a couple of decades before it closed in 2019, and wore a number of hats there. I worked as the track's publicity director and also as the announcer of the races. And along the way, I wrote a book called Not by a Long Shot, a season behind the scenes at a hard luck horse track. And I wrote that book based on, I read some great literature as I was learning about the sport, about the champions, about the Kentucky Derby, the race that we're going to see tomorrow. But nobody was writing about the things that I experienced on a daily basis, which was the hard scrabble life at kind of a minor league racetrack. And one year I decided to write it all down. So the book, Not by a Long Shot, is the product of a year of me taking my journal entries and formatting them into a finished product. And the characters that you see at a racetrack really carry the story. And the people who competed in the New England racing circuit, which back in the day included tracks in Maine, in Vermont, Rockingham Park in New Hampshire. And of course, Rhode Island had two gems of a racetrack, Lincoln Downs and Narragansett Park. That was to me, the reality of the racetrack, not what we see once a year on the first Saturday in May with the pomp and pageantry of the Derby. Certainly that's the pinnacle of the profession and the great part of the sport. But I wanted to bring a side of life that was not seen to many people to print. And that's what I did with Not by a Long Shot. And now here we are a few years later, and I write for a publication called Thoroughbred Daily News, an international horse paper. And pretty much for 6 months out of the year, my main beat is covering the Kentucky Derby. We start with our coverage way back in December as the lead in to the big race. And now we're just, we're taping this obviously a little bit before the party, so we're not actually live. But we're ready to go and looking at a couple of horses who might be interesting for you.
So yeah, who do you like the favorite this year? Essential Quality?
So Essential Quality is going to be the favorite in the Derby on Saturday. And before we talk about Essential Quality, let's back up just for a second to kind of give people the proper context of the Kentucky Derby.
Sure.
It's run once a year, the first Saturday in May, except in years when we have a pandemic, like last year where they had to knock it back to Labor Day. But the special thing about the Kentucky Derby is a horse only gets one chance in its life to run in the Derby. It's for horses aged 3. And if they don't get into the Derby, if they don't make the qualifying cut, if they're not good enough, you have to remember that every year in the United States, there are some 20,000 registered thoroughbreds born. Only 20 of them are going to make it into the starting gate on Saturday. So just making it into the race is a big accomplishment in and of itself. And another way that the Derby is different from an everyday horse race in America is It's at an unusually long distance. It's 1.25 miles. Most races in the United States are substantially shorter than that. So the horses in the Derby on Saturday are really going to get tested to the limits of their endurance ability. And the other interesting thing about the Derby, we mentioned 20 horses in the race. That's also very unusual. There are usually no more than 12 horses in any given everyday thoroughbred race. So with a lot on the line, big crowded field of horses, it can be a very chaotic race, and that kind of leads to the excitement of the Derby. The best horse does not always win. So Essential Quality, as you mentioned, is the favorite. He was the champion last year in his 2-year-old season. And to kind of put that into perspective, the horses racing in the Derby on Saturday at age 3, I would liken them to maybe college athletes in their ability and where they are in their physical development. Essential Quality last year was the 2-year-old champion in his juvenile season. He was probably like a high school athlete competing against other high school athletes. Now those horses have had 6 months. They're maturing. They're figuring out what the racing game is all about. Their minds are catching up to their bodies. And, we're seeing horses who are not quite the finished product. Maybe later this year, once we get into what they call the fall championship season, we will see those horses competing on an even terms against their older contemporaries. But for right now, the first Saturday in May, these are the top 3-year-olds. And as you said, Essential Quality, the favorite. Well, let's talk about his pluses first. He's undefeated. He's never lost a race. He's 5 for 5, and he is a really intense competitor. He's gray, so it'll be easy to pick him out when you watch the Derby on TV. He should be up close to the action in the first flight. He's number 14. He'll break from one of the outside positions. So he should be what we call pressing the pace. He won't be one of the leaders, I don't think, 1, 2, 3, but he'll be right on their shoulders, forcing those horses to go a little bit faster than they might be capable of. And what Essential Quality has shown us so far is he not only can run fast early splits in the Kentucky Derby, but he can stick around for the finish. He knows how to finish a race properly. He has a torque. He has an extra gear that some of these other horses haven't had. So that's why he's going to be the favorite. Now, reasons not to bet the favorite in the Derby, there's something called the juvenile jinx. The horse who is the champion at age 2, which Essential Quality was last year, has only come back and won the Kentucky Derby twice in the past 36 years. That's a pretty steep historical trend to try and buck if you're Essential Quality. So that's one reason I might be trying to take a shot against him on Saturday.
Yeah, Good Magic was the juvenile champion a couple years ago, and obviously he did all right in the Derby, but he didn't win it. But he got caught in a bad year with Justify, I guess.
Yeah, and you have to remember, when you're the champion, you're what I like to call a headline horse. So you get all the ink.
Yep.
You're talked about on podcasts. We're talking about Essential Quality in this interview to lead off.
Yep.
So the Derby is a great betting race for looking at horses who are a little bit under the radar. And I'm trying to smoke out a bomb who is a big priced horse who I don't think anybody is talking about so far. And his name is King Fury. He's number 16 in the Derby. And
Yep.
King Fury is interesting. He was sort of in the top tier of horses last year. He had 5 good races over a distance of ground that seemed to say he could be the type of horse to run well on the first Saturday in May for 1.25 miles. But he had a minor injury. He got sidelined. He was late to the party, so to speak, coming back this year. He only had one, what they call a prep race in preparation for the Derby. But he ran a lights out race 3 weeks ago in preparation for this. So he's a little bit behind some of his contemporaries, but I think the potential is there. So if you were going to bet Essential Quality, you're betting a horse who's already proven. We've already seen his best races. King Fury, you'd be banking on him maybe having not hit his best, and he'll be about 25 to 1 or so in the betting.
Yeah, I think Essential Quality, I think I have questions of if he can make the distance. I've read that. And then Brad Cox he's never won the Derby, correct? So he's kind of like that's an unknown for him.
Yeah, that's the trainer of the horse, Brad Cox. He has never even started a horse in the Kentucky Derby. So that's, I'm not going to hold it against him. Every Derby winning trainer has to start somewhere. But it is, again, it's another notch in your head. If you're trying to find reasons to bet against Essential Quality, you've definitely hit on one right there.
And then Luis Saez is the jockey of Essential Quality, who is famously because the last Linden Place Derby party, Maximum Security was the one who crossed the finish line first with Luis Saez, and then obviously we know the rest is history. So I'm wondering if he wants that official Derby win. So he could want it.
Yeah, so what Joe is referring to there is the horse who crossed the finish wire first, Maximum Security, was disqualified because he caused interference around the far turn to other horses. So yeah, I would think Luis Saez, he is one of the top five
Yes,
riders in my book
definitely.
for riding right now. So he maybe has a little bit of extra incentive there to put it over the top legitimately as a Derby winner this time.
So I just wanted, for people that don't bet a lot, we're going to do a 50-50 raffle, and then we are going to pick the last place winner. So I was
I'm
wondering,
good at that.
just for the 50-50 raffle, how do you make your Derby bet or any educated bet that you do? Because I know a lot of handicappers, which is what we refer to as bettors, they study differently. So I was wondering your opinions on it.
Well, I think for the Derby, it's as we've mentioned, it's a special race. The circumstances are different, so I will alter my thinking from the way I would a normal race of the other 364 days of the year. I think the keys are trying to find some value in the odds. That means looking past the headline horses that we've talked about to a horse like King Fury, who is my best bet in the Derby. But there are a couple of others in there. There's a horse called Known Agenda. He's number
Mm-hmm.
one in the race. He won in March. He won the Florida Derby, which is the big race in Florida leading up to the
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky Derby. And he's the type of horse who should sit mid-pack, make one sustained run at the leaders. Unfortunately for him, here's another way that the Derby is different. He's in post position number one. It's closest to the fence and the rail. You would think normally shortest way around the track. That's going to save him some ground. The Derby's different because in a crush of a 20-horse field, if you don't break alertly from the inside post position, you're going to get jammed back with all the other horses trying to crowd over and get that ground saving position. So Known Agenda might have been up against the grain of things when they drew the post positions for the race. Another horse that I would consider in there is, and he's got some Rhode Island connections, is Hot Rod Charlie. He's a horse who was hitting the board, running second and third behind horses like Essential Quality last year. But Hot Rod Charlie wasn't the fully developed product then. He was a big long shot. He was 94-1 when he ran behind Essential Quality in the championship race last year as 2-year-olds. Now at age 3, he's slowly gotten better and better. And the local connection for people at the party who might be interested is he's owned in partnership by 5 guys who were on the Brown University football team, and they were fraternity brothers. So they're getting very lucky with their first horse. It's kind of like winning the lottery just to get into the Derby with your first horse.
Yeah, definitely. So, what do you think about Midnight Bourbon? I saw him schooling the other day, and he was a little rowdy, but Steve Asmussen, the trainer, he got him down calm. He's a little interesting to me just because Mike Smith's the jockey, and he's has some good success, obviously.
Yeah, Mike Smith is a Derby winning champion jockey. Midnight Bourbon, the horse, he strikes me as a horse. I find him intriguing to maybe hit one of the minor placings like second or third. And the way I would assess Midnight Bourbon is when you look at his statistical body of work, he belongs with these Derby horses. He runs relatively fast races. He's never been out of the money, meaning he's always finished first, second, and third. I believe he's had 8 career races, and he's never too far out of the hunt. To me, he lacks the killer instinct. He doesn't always win. He's been in some positions where he should have powered past horses in deep stretch, and he didn't. So that's what kind of holds me back on Midnight Bourbon. But the upshot to him is, again, we're looking for non-headline horses and looking for a big price. He'll be about 20-1 in the betting.
Thoughts on Rock Your World? Usually the Santa Anita Derby winners have success in the Derby. So
Rock Your World is a very interesting horse. He's probably the top threat from California this year. Very lightly raced. He's only been out 3 times for races in his career, but he's won all 3 of them. He should be a factor on the front end, meaning he should be one of the leaders of the Derby. It's a question for him, though. For me, I don't think the horses he beat in California are of Derby quality. There's only one other horse that he's been running with that is going to the Kentucky Derby. And I just think it's a little too much too soon for him to handle that much pace pressure on the front end. So I'm probably going to take a stand against Rock Your World.
All right. And then I guess talk about Bob Baffert, one of the most successful trainers in the sport and for the Derby. What are your thoughts on his chances this year?
So Bob Baffert is he's been Mr. Kentucky Derby the past 25 years. He's won 6 Kentucky Derbies. That's right up there in the record books with some of the all-time training greats. And Bob, this year, it's interesting because he annually gets clients, owners who spend millions of dollars at the horse auctions. They buy the best bred horses, and he's got an expensive stable of horse flesh to try and take aim at the Derby every year. This year, it didn't quite work out that way for him. He's probably down to his 4th best horse on his depth chart of his stable, a horse named Medina Spirit, who's going to be running in the Derby this year. And Medina Spirit, we've talked about expensive horses and the racing royalty and people who are gazillionaires who are able to afford some of these racehorses at the top level. Medina Spirit cost $1,000 as a horse at an auction when he was a young horse prior to his racing career. That's not very expensive. You can't even get a pet dog for $1,000 these days. And so Medina Spirit, he'll be kind of a rags to riches story. But I think you hit on a good point there. You can never discount Bob Baffert. So while people are saying, well, this horse is Medina Spirit, he's kind of an overachiever. He may be, based on some statistics, doesn't belong with these horses. He's got the Bob Baffert magic. And when you've won the Derby 6 times, you have to know what you're doing. So he could be the type of horse who sneaks in there also at a big price, and people will throw their hands up and say, oh, Bob Baffert, how did I ignore his horse this year?
Yeah, for last year, I liked his The Law a lot just because of his close connections to New England, and then Authentic he went right by him. So
well, he took your money and mine down with the Flames with his The Law. So we'll look for a little turnaround this year.
Yeah. So who would you pick as the last place winner? Because we are doing a bet for that as well.
Yeah, I've been told I'm pretty good at picking the last place winner. So I've got plenty of experience in that. So we do these. So at the racetrack, we sometimes do those bets for fun in the press box, just to kill some time. So the one thing that I would say always factor into if you're trying to win a last place novelty bet is pick the speed oriented horse, like a front runner, who's probably going to come back to the field. He's going to maybe try and fire his best shot, but he'll get tired very quickly and come back. There are a lot of long shots who are what we call tailgate runners. They come from way off the pace. They drop back to last and make one big move. You don't want those types of horses for your last place selection because they're usually going to be passing at least a few stragglers in the home stretch. So I would say maybe look for a horse like Helium, who is also, like we said, Rock Your World, 3 for 3, undefeated, a little too inexperienced to my way of thinking. And I guess maybe the same theme, Soup and Sandwich. He's the other gray horse in the race besides Essential Quality. Same thing. He's 3 for 3. He likes to be up front, trying to show the way. I don't really think he's going to be able to go the 1.25 mile distance. So maybe Helium or Super Sandwich to be in the back of the pack.
So any final thoughts on the Derby this year or horse racing in general?
No, I think it's great to see people who, even if they're not involved in horse racing on a daily basis, they get dressed up for one big year. You've got your party going on, and that's going on all across the country. People with their fancy hats and their mint juleps, and getting dressed up to enjoy the sport of horse racing. And those of us who are in the industry, we look at it as a way to try and introduce people to come out to the racetrack and maybe be a fan on a daily basis. It's a great way to enter the sport. And look at those guys at Brown. That's what they did. They were enthralled by the Kentucky Derby. They put some money together, and now they've got a horse in the Derby. I'm not saying that's going to happen to you or me or anybody at the Derby party tonight who's watching this, but you can dream big, and that's what the Derby is all about.
Yeah, I think it's important to be an ambassador for the sport and introduce it to people that have no idea about it. And then I think the Derby is a good headway into the sport of horse racing. And like you said earlier, like there's so many tracks that are unknown, but that's where horse racing starts, is those types of tracks.
Exactly. So, enjoy the Derby. And then if you like it, maybe you can scope out a visit to somewhere like a Belmont Park or a Saratoga.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, TD, and I hope to talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Good
Thanks.
luck to everybody out there on the Derby. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.